Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Friday, May 8th, 2020. On today's episode, we're going to discuss what we've been doing at the Watercooler. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me to this podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Senior Editor Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
So Brad is off today. I promise he will return next week, but we're going to do this without him. I think we can pull it off. Let's start first with what we've been doing, which is a section that almost, since this pandemic, has almost fallen off this podcast because, no one is doing anything. And even the one entry we have here is something that was done many months ago. So, HD, what did you do?
Yeah, this is something I did almost a year ago, but you're seeing it just now because internet and all those things. But I shot a video with Ryan Bergara and Shay Madej from BuzzFeed Unsolved, but they've launched their own channel called The Watcher. And they have a series of videos on the Watcher channel on YouTube, one of which is called Top 5 Beatdown, in which they argue and have hot takes about various topics that they rank from 1 to 5. And I was invited on to talk about best Pixar movies. You can watch the video on YouTube. We'll link it in the show notes, I'm sure. And I'm sure many of you will be angry at my picks as well, because everyone, has their favorite Pixar movies. I have my opinions. My opinions are right. So it's a fun video, and you'll get to see a lot of me just laughing awkwardly and pulling a lot of fun faces that I'm sure will be circulated throughout the internet.
I think everybody's going to agree completely with not only the top 5 films that you picked, but also the rankings, HD.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure.
Why was this thing held for almost a year? What is going on here?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it was when I filmed it, they were still readying the launch of Watcher, and they were still under BuzzFeed. I think they still do work for BuzzFeed as well. So I think they were just kind of piling up their episodes and waiting to launch them at various times. I don't know why mine took so long, because they told me that it would be dropped in November, which this is a long way from November's now. But yeah, it's maybe people just wanted, it's good quarantine watching if you guys want to watch some Pixar movies with us and get angry about it.
I wish I could bank content for that long. That is insane. Okay, let's move on to what we've been reading. Ben, what have you been reading this week?
So I am almost done. I have 20 pages or something left with volume 1 of Wild Cards, which is I guess the first of what looks to be a 27-book series. I didn't realize that it also encompasses comic books and graphic novels and role-playing games. I didn't realize that this was quite such a drastic, huge, expansive franchise when I started. I don't know if I would have really started this if I knew ahead of time. But Wild Cards is this series of science fiction and superhero shared universe anthologies, and it's edited by George R. R. Martin, who wrote the Game of Thrones books. And I think Hulu is developing this into a TV series, and when I wrote up the news about that for slashfilm.com a while ago, I thought the premise sounded really interesting, so I ordered the first book, and I just am very close to finishing it now. The premise is the books are set during this alternate history right after World War II, where there is a virus that it's an alien virus, actually, that sort of lands on the planet and infects people, and it rewrites their DNA and mutates the survivors. A lot of people die, but those who survive are mutated, and they fall into 2 camps. The Jokers, which are people who get really horrible physical conditions where their faces are melted off, or they are sort of outcast and rejects of society because they look so hideous because of what's happened to them because of this virus. Or there's this other category called aces, which is why Wild Cards is the name of the thing. You're either a Joker or an ace. And the aces are basically superheroes. Like they gain the power to fly or have super strength or read people's minds or turn invisible or, any number of different things. So it's basically George R. R. Martin. He writes a couple of the anthology shorts in here as well. And a bunch of his friends and sort of colleagues and contemporaries just doing their take on superhero, like sci-fi stories. And it's really interesting because it blends in with real life events. It's sort of like the whole thing is sort of about the intersection of superheroes and politics. It reminded me of Watchmen in that way. Like one of the short stories is about fascism and serves as this sort of like warning or unfortunate prophecy about what happens when too much power is consolidated in one area of society. And one story will like almost offhandedly mention a relationship between two minor characters, and then another writer will pick up that reference and like bloom it out into its own full love story in great detail. So it's interesting the way that the stories sort of like crisscross as the book goes through these different anthology pieces. I thought I'm very impressed with it so far. It's really heartbreaking and thoughtful stuff. There's a section where Joseph McCarthy shows up and he follows up his communist witch hunt by like calling the aces to testify and sets up a federal registration system for the heroes, which sounds very, very familiar for anybody who read the Civil War stretch in Marvel Comics. So
wait, which one came first, this or Civil War?
Well, yeah, this has been going on since the 1980s. Like the mid 1986 is when the first one was written. I think it was published in 87, and it's still going on. They're still publishing stories in this. So I think that Civil War comic was probably like a decade ago or something like that. And this collection of stories, volume 1 that I'm reading, is a lot of the earlier stories from the mid 80s. So it's Wild Cards Volume 1, edited by George R. R. Martin. If you're interested in checking that out.
Ben, are you aware of the origin story of this book series?
I'm not, no.
George R. R. Martin ran a years-long RPG campaign with a bunch of writer friends, and they fell in love with their characters and their world so much they decided to make these stories about them. So all these stories are based on their characters from this RPG, and then other people started saying, hey, can we contribute? And it built out from there.
Wow, that's really cool. That sounds like something that you would be involved in, Jacob.
Yeah, it's a really cool story. Like when famously Neil Gaiman pitched the Sandman as a character in Wild Cards, and George R. R. Martin said, I don't know who you are, kid. So he said, fine, and went and wrote Sandman as a comic.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Oh my God.
Didn't something similar happen with that space TV show was on Sci-Fi and is now on Amazon? The Expanse?
I think so. I don't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah,
but
I believe it started as an RPG that they were playing, and then
I know those guys are big RPG fans. The guys who write those books together under one pen name, and there's now an Expanse RPG, so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, how many more volumes are there?
A lot. I think there are 28 books so far, and then there's also like all the comics and graphic novels and all the other sort of ancillary materials. So I'm not sure how far I'm going to go into this, but I wanted to at least have the base of knowledge for if and when that Hulu series actually comes to fruition, so I could sort of understand it and maybe enhance some of our, the writing and coverage and stuff that we do on the site when that comes around. And it just sounded interesting to me on a personal level too. So it's nice when that sort of both things happen at once.
See, I didn't even know anything about this. This is amazing to me that it's something this big that I had only vaguely heard of. But okay, let's jump into what we've been watching. I will start things off with something that HT talked about last week. I think it was last week. HT, was it last week that you mentioned the half of it?
Yeah, it was last week.
Yeah, this is new on Netflix. It is a coming-of-age comedy drama. It comes from writer-director Alice Wu, who I want to say is like an up-and-comer that we need to watch, but in my research, I learned that she's actually 10 years older than me, and is I wouldn't consider an up-and-comer. She actually made a film in 2005. She quit her job at Microsoft and made this film in 2005 called Saving Face. Has anybody seen Saving Face?
I haven't, but I did do an interview with Alice Wu, and she talked about directing this film and then leaving Hollywood for about 10 years, and the half of it, writing that movie and bringing it and developing it, is what brought her back to Hollywood.
Well, I totally want to go back and see Saving Face. A big career ahead of her, for sure. I'm a big fan of coming-of-age dramas. As I said, this is kind of I've been pitching it to people as Love, Simon meets Roxanne, which, yes, I know is like based on something else too, but I think that's probably the best way of kind of describing it. It's smart, it's charming, I don't know, it does some, like, she takes some bold strokes to elevate this above other films of like this, high school coming of age drama. There's this brilliant shot that I don't know. I just think like it's on the surface. Yes, it's a coming of age high school drama, but just how Alice treats everything. Like there's this one shot where there's these two people in a diner having a conversation, and there's the main character is outside the diner in her car, kind of texting both people in the diner, trying to like create this conversation between them. She's providing. She's trying to help these two hook up, and just the way it's shot is just so brilliant. Ben, you also saw this. What did you think of the half of it?
I did like that moment that you mentioned. I like the framing, especially where the camera sort of pans off to one side and you can see the text that character is sending. I thought that was really well done. Overall, I have to say that I walked away a little disappointed from this one. I think the skeleton is really, really promising. Like the bones of the story, on paper, everything looks great. I feel like the execution was a little lacking for me. Part of it has to do with the casting. I really did not care for the main male lead. I just didn't. I didn't find him to be charming or interesting in the way that a lot of these other Netflix rom-com male leads have been to me. This character just seems maybe a little bit too dumb for his own good and for the movie's own good.
Isn't that what he's supposed to be?
Sure, but I think there's a line, and this went like too dumb to the point where like I am no longer capable of like engaging and I don't know, like pulling for this character in a meaningful way. So I don't know. The movie sort of kept me at arm's length by the execution of it. While I think the premise is really, really well done. I think there's, just some of the dialogue and stuff I was not a huge fan of. But I know that this is a big movie for a lot of people, and I feel like the jerk who's like, oh, this thing that everybody loves, I didn't really care for it, but that's how it shook out this time.
Yeah, well, I don't know. HT and me, we're both on the same page on this one, and we say go stream it on Netflix right now, right?
For sure.
Okay, what else have we been watching? HT, what have you been watching this week?
Well, I started watching Never Have I Ever after you recommended it last week. It's a show that I was planning to watch because I'm actually a fan of Mindy Kaling, despite some of the ups and downs of her writing. And I just was really interested in seeing this show. And I binged it entirely and finished it within like 2 days. I loved Never Have I Ever. I feel like it was Mindy Kaling like condensing all of her strengths with rom-com writing, with cringe comedy and secondhand embarrassment, and writing these really loud, bombastic characters, and putting all those strengths into a surprisingly moving teen rom-com show that actually becomes an examination of grief. As I was watching it, it occurred to me that this is basically the teen version of Fleabag, in the way that it kind of takes this sort of unlikable character and takes you through all the series of bad decisions that she makes and how it pushes people apart from her. But it's really just her not really being able to deal with her grief and her own sort of issues with that. So it follows Debbie, who is like a character loosely inspired by Mindy Kaling and her own childhood growing up in suburban Massachusetts. And she is I think is a sophomore in high school who had just lost her dad to a heart attack. He died during her school concert. And it affected her so much that she actually was paralyzed from the waist down for a good 6 months. Or was it 3 months? I think it was 3 months. And after she sort of recovers, she's still not really able to move on and process the grief from losing her father, and she kind of just dives into trying to change her image as the nerdy girl and get with the popular boy Paxton Hall Yoshida. Yes. Anyways, I really, really enjoyed this, and I say this as a fan of the Mindy Project, which is a show that, again, like, had its real ups and downs, but it kind of I could see it kind of creating sort of a template for Never Have I Ever, and I feel like Never Have I Ever really improved upon that and what Mindy Kaling has been good at writing before, which is really good rom-com tropes done in a way that's really sincere and funny and enjoyable to watch, despite you knowing how cheesy and cliched it is, and giving it sort of like a fun modern twist, as well as like touching on topics that she hasn't really touched on before, like grief and family dynamics and those kind of fractured immigrant family dynamics as well, which I really enjoyed. So I like the show a lot, and it's nothing groundbreaking by any means, but I just really feel happy, I guess, that like Mindy Kaling has found a show that has like been able to get all of her best talents and put that into it and create like this really fun, really almost like addicting romantic comedy with some wonderful themes of grief and loss. So I really like Never Have I Ever. I cried twice. So that might be the show, but it also might be me quarantining by myself and like not having people to talk to, and just like my emotions were amplified. So no, I'm fine. But I really like Never Have I Ever.
Ben, you also saw this?
I watched just the first episode right after I watched the half of it, and HT and I are definitely on the same page with this one. I really, really loved the first episode. My wife and I, but we watched both of these back to back, and we're like, wow, what a great palate cleanser, because they're both sort of like, teen rom-com, like in that world a little bit. And I just found the writing and the jokes and the characters to be so much more clever and engaging, and just like more my tempo than I did for the half of it. And I really agree with almost every word that HT said there, especially like the her reading on Mindy Kaling as a writer and performer, and like where her strengths and weaknesses are. I also watched all maybe I didn't finish the Mindy Project. I might only have like a few episodes of that left, but I think we're definitely on the same page there too. And just from this first episode, I'm so happy that this is like the perfect distillation of Mindy's voice as a writer. And I think, it seems like I have a lot to look forward to with the rest of the show. So I'm definitely eager to finish work today and try to binge through the rest of the season.
I haven't been watching that much this week. I did watch the season finale of Westworld on HBO, and I will say I think it was good. I don't think it was great. It didn't the last few episodes were a little shaky. This one I think there was a lot going on, and I really am interested on. I think I'm more compelled and interested in where this sends us into next season and what that's going to be. And I know Chris and I talked about this previously on the podcast, and I think he's dead on in this could be going into other sci-fi territory. And that to me is very exciting, because it seems like, this season a lot of people were calling it a soft reboot. And I feel like next season is going to be this hard reboot that's has a lot of potential. So I'm still excited for Westworld, not as much as I was in season 1, but I think season 3 altogether was a little bit better than season 2. I think they maybe went. I've said this before in the podcast, but I think they took the criticism that season 2 was too convoluted and complicated to heart too much, and season 3 was a little bit too straightforward. So I hope they can find a better balance in season 4. But I'm still in. I'm excited to see whenever they end up making season 4 where that's going to end up going. The other thing I've been watching this week is I watched the series finale of the Clone Wars. This is the Star Wars animated TV show from Dave Filoni. It's on Disney Plus. And guys, the last 4 episodes of this series are as good as I don't know. It's at least as good as the prequel movies, if not better than most of the prequels. It is cinematic storytelling in the Star Wars universe, and at a level that not only expands but enhances story beats that have happened before. I know some of you on this podcast have had problems with how, like, Mandalorian expands this world. This does it in ways that is very interesting, and I wish there was a way, because we're like 7 seasons into the Clone Wars. I wish there was a way that, like, I could have Jacob, you watch this and enjoy it, but there's so many seasons that predate this that there's so much knowledge that I think is required. I wish there was like a template of, like, here are the 8 episodes you need to watch before watching this final conclusion, because I cried. There's they brought back Ray Park to motion capture Darth Maul. Darth Maul is in this, and he finally gets his due as a character, not just as a cool looking Sith that fights with the lightsaber. Like, I feel like the series has really given him his due. Ahsoka, just, I don't know. I really like Clone Wars. I will say that I'm not as in love with Clone Wars as a whole as most Star Wars fans are. There are a lot of, and I know this is a dirty phrase, but filler episodes. And I don't mean that in that filler episodes, in that they don't progress canon or anything like that in any interesting way. I mean filler episodes that they just feel like they don't progress the story. They just feel like you could skip over these episodes and still watch the other episodes around it, and it would feel like you missed no beats of the development of these characters and the storyline as a whole. And I feel like there's too many of those. I know that some people have lists online of, like, what are the essential Clone Wars episodes to watch, and I've never watched it in that order. But when Clone Wars is at its best, it is some of the best of Star Wars. So I can't recommend it more. If you have a chance, watch the final 4 episodes. It plays as a long animated movie, and it is pretty great. Jacob, what have you been watching?
I watched a movie that just hit Shudder called Blood Quantum, and this played at Toronto International Film Festival last year. Meredith Borders reviewed it for us, and so it's been on my radar for a few months, and it's just now streaming on Shudder. And this is a really interesting movie. It's a little sloppy, a little rough around the edges, but it's such a big swing for a low-budget horror film that I have to recommend it to people who are looking for something unique. And it's set in 1985. It's a period piece, but alternate history, where a zombie outbreak destroys the world, and it's set on a reservation called Red Crow, full of indigenous people. And it turns out that indigenous people are immune to the zombie virus. They can get bit, and as long as they don't get their throat torn out, they survive. So the movie is essentially about the sheriff of the reservation, played by Michael Grey Eyes, who's like one of Hollywood's go-to Native American actors, and his people as they attempt to survive the apocalypse, knowing they can't get the zombie virus. And it's a really gory, violent, intense movie. Lots of unique ways to kill zombies, but it's really the cultural exploration of this reservation and its people that makes it interesting. And the fact that it, without going too deep into the plot, ultimately it's about all the white people start rushing this reservation because it has protectors who can adequately protect people because they can't get the virus, and about how the cultural divide between the indigenous population and all the Caucasian and white people ends up leading to all this kind of turmoil. This is such an I don't want to say much more because it's such a interesting thing. Chris, you were at TIFF last year. Did you catch this?
I have not, and I have heard good things about it, and I think I have it in my Shudder queue. I just have not gotten around to watching it yet.
And the cast is almost entirely indigenous actors, which is hit and miss sometimes. Like the Michael Grey Eyes, who's look at his IMDb, and he's been in everything. He's but this is the first time I've seen him in a heroic, leading role, and he's terrific. And there are a lot of other, recognizable actors as well. But there are some newcomers who are good and some who aren't so good. Clearly they went out of their way to find indigenous actors, which is great. But the results can be a little mixed. But in terms of like horror that's really swinging for the fences, Blood Quantum, which is a Shudder exclusive, so you need to be a member there. It really is something cool, and that's worth seeking out. On the other side of the spectrum, a big glossy Hollywood movie that nobody saw earlier this year, Underwater. Kristen Stewart in an underwater research station. Bad stuff happens. Creatures are running amok. 94 minutes long. No fat on it. This movie bombed really bad at the box office. I think it's the last film to be released under the 20th Century Fox banner before it became 20th Century Pictures. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure. So it has that weird distinction. I really like this. It is clearly leaning on a lot of familiar tropes. It's alien underwater in a lot of ways, but the creature designs are terrific. Kristen Stewart has a badass haircut. She is surrounded by some really interesting character actors and also T.J. Miller, so that take from that what you will. But I really enjoyed this. It has no ambitions above being just a 94-minute long creature feature. It's just clever enough, just scary enough, just gooey enough to really get the job done. Did anybody else catch Underwater? It was Blink, and you missed it in theaters.
I saw it. I reviewed it for the site actually, and I love this movie. It's a lot of fun, and what I really like about it is there's literally no first act. Like it just kicks into gear. Like literally, like the first scene, something goes like terribly wrong, and then it never lets up from there. And I wish more movies would do that. Just like jump right into it, not waste time with boring, useless crap. So I really like this, and yeah, I dug it a lot. It's got some great like Lovecraftian tones in it, which is always nice to see in a Hollywood movie. And yeah, it's a shame this did not do well. Especially like I feel like if this had gone like straight to Netflix or something, maybe it would have generated more buzz. I don't know. It's just, but it came out in like January or whatever, and that's like the dumping ground. But it deserved better than it got.
Yeah, and I get this for $5.99 on Amazon as a rental. And if you do that on Amazon, you can also watch Lighthouse, which is streaming there, and do a Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson aquatic mayhem double feature, which I highly recommend for obvious reasons. But anyway, also for rental on your usual places, I got it for $5.99 on Amazon. Bloodshot, which has a distinction of currently being, I believe, the last movie released in theaters before they were shut down. And oh boy, I'm actually a big fan of Valiant Comics, especially the modern ones, where Bloodshot, who's a 90s superhero, is getting this really tragic, complex makeover, or he's become a stand-in for how the military abuses soldiers and how men become tools of government. And the movie tries to do that at times, and it's ultimately pretty half-baked. The script is built around a really interesting core idea, which is essentially Memento with superheroes, which you see in the trailer, it's kind of spoiled, but I don't want to say more just in case. I think there's something there. There's something there about this character who is a war veteran who wakes up without memory and is told he died in the line of duty. He's been brought back to life with nanobots, and about how he starts essentially being used for nefarious purposes. And has to rebel against that. I think there's a cool concept there, and the way it's structured actually is genuinely interesting. The halfway point of the movie has a big reveal that's given away in the trailers that I think is genuinely fun to see and really rewrites the movie you think you're seeing. But it doesn't change the fact that the story is full of bad jokes, really weak character development. Lamorne Morris, who I love in New Girl, is doing a Cockney accent here, is like the wacky sidekick, comic relief, and he's really bad. It's like shades of Don Cheadle and Ocean's 11 bad. And ultimately, though, the real failure of the movie is Vin Diesel as the lead. He is clearly doesn't care here, or he's playing Dominic Toretto again. He's not doing anything that makes his character interesting or relatable or broken. I mean, I was imagining, because I just watched Beyond Skyline, I was imagining Frank Grillo in this part, an actor who looks weary, who looks tired, who has no shame about playing somebody who's sad and who has weakness inside of him. Whereas Vin Diesel's constant posturing, constant tough guy attitude tears this down in a way that, like, I just think of the Marvel movies, where the Marvel movies are so interested in the weaknesses of the heroes and how they overcome those weaknesses, whereas Vin Diesel is tough guy from the start, tough guy at the end, and there's just no change there. Did anybody else here see Bloodshot? Am I weird for picking on Vin Diesel of all people?
I saw it. I also reviewed this for the site. I did not care for it. It was just too serious, even with like the jokes in it. It's like it takes its premise way too seriously, and like there's like zero fun to be had in this movie at all. Like they should have like, I don't know, had fun with this premise. It's just, it feels very much like a late 90s, early 2000s action movie. It's like Daredevil, basically, the Ben Affleck Daredevil. That's what this movie feels like to me. But even that movie has like jokes in it, whereas this is just Vin Diesel being way too serious, and I just don't care. He doesn't have the range for stuff like this. He should just stick to Fast and the Furious at this point, and Guardians of the Galaxy, where he only has to say one line over and over again.
But Chris, what about the comic relief of Lamorne Morris with a Cockney accent and yelling?
Oh God, just so bad. Like, why? Why did he make that? I didn't read the comic, so is that, I don't know. Maybe that character is British in the comic, if he exists in the comic. I don't know, but why make him do that accent? I don't get it. It's a bad movie. Bloodshot.
Yeah. I don't know. I was looking through our archives, and this is going to be at one point directed by the John Wick team of Chad Zaleski and David Leitch, and I'm imagining a better script with those guys directing. But anyway, moving on. Working my way through a 30 for 30 archives in ESPN Plus. Chasing Tyson, sort of a spiritual sequel, but not really, to Doc I talked about last week, 42-1. This is about the relationship between Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield. Most famous because Mike Tyson bit off a chunk of Evander Holyfield's ear in a fight in 1997. And if you only know that part of the story, which I did going in, this is actually a really good argument for why Evander Holyfield was forgotten and overshadowed, despite being one of the most successful boxers of all time from like a winning championship point of view. And like I said, as somebody who doesn't really watch boxing at all in real life, but loves a good boxing story, this is a really solid doc. And you realize that Evander Holyfield deserves to be known more than the guy who had his ear bitten by Mike Tyson. So that's streaming on ESPN Plus. Double feature my wife and I did on HBO Now, streaming both there. Mr. and Mrs. Smith and True Lies, both relationship comedies built around espionage and spies. They're both really fun. I know True Lies, we've talked about this on the show before. It's aged interestingly in its depiction of Middle Eastern characters. But otherwise, I really think it's, despite being occasionally retrograde, it's a really fun combination of rom-com and James Cameron blockbuster. I enjoy it a lot. Still waiting for the 4K disc, Mr. Cameron, bring it on. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I know at time's release, I feel like it's overshadowed by Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie making all the tabloid headlines. But the movie itself's fun. And Doug Liman, he occasionally knocks it out of the park. I think Born Identity, this, and Edge of Tomorrow make him like an all-timer for me, even though, he also made Jumper. Who can forget Jumper? Makes for a fun double feature. Anyone want to say any words about Mr. and Mrs. Smith and True Lies while we're on these two movies?
I liked both of them. I have not rewatched either in a long time, but yeah, just remembering back to True Lies. I think what is his name? Grant Heslov is who's George Clooney's production partner, plays one of the like Arab soldiers who is part of the evil army in True Lies, which is like a weird piece of trivia. But
actually, it's hard to correct you. He plays the one good Arab who's on Arnold Schwarzenegger's side.
All right, good, yeah.
So yeah, he plays the token, hey, we're not racist character.
Okay, all right. So yeah, it's been too long since I've seen that movie, evidently.
Okay then, Chris, what have you been watching?
I watched all of Dead to Me season 2. That just dropped on Netflix today, I believe, but I had screeners of it a few weeks ago, so my wife and I burned through it over a weekend. And if you have yet to start watching this show on Netflix, I highly recommend it. It's only the episodes are only a half hour long, which is always great because you can just blow through them. But it's just a really compelling show because literally every episode ends with like a shocking cliffhanger, and it's not done in like a cheap way where it's like, oh, all right, they're gonna chicken out of this in the next episode. Like there is a payoff to every cliffhanger, but it just hooks you because every episode, just the minute it ends, you're just shocked and you immediately want to jump into the next one. And the show is about two women who could become unlikely friends. I don't want to say too much because the power of the show is the less you know about it, the better it is. But Christina Applegate plays this woman whose husband was recently killed in a hit and run, and she goes to this grief counseling group, and she meets this other woman played by Linda Cardellini, and they become friends. And then as the series progresses, you learn that they both of these women have a lot of secrets that they're keeping, and the secrets slowly start trickling out. And season 1 ended with a big shocking moment, and season 2 picks up right from there and runs with it. And I think I liked season 2 even more, just because the two leads really know their characters and by now in this second season, and they're both doing really great work because they have to do a lot of big emotional scenes, especially this season where things get really bad and dangerous for both of them, and they're both like losing their minds in every episode. And it can't be like an easy gig for either of these actresses, because literally every episode has them breaking down into hysterics, but they're both so good at it. And I also want to add, this is a funny show. I know I'm making it sound like this like incredibly stressful nightmare show, but it's very darkly comedic. So Dead to Me season 2, it's the perfect weekend binge, because you can just you'll finish it in like 2 days, honestly. And I also decided to just on a whim rewatch the first Pirates of the Caribbean film, which I haven't seen in a very, very long time. And I feel like this movie has been sort of tainted a bit by all of the sequels, which I honestly think all of them are just really like
the second one isn't bad.
No, it is, Peter.
It's not as great, but it's not bad.
No, I don't like any of the sequels, but this first one,
It's not good.
yeah, thank you, HT. But the first one really holds up. It's a lot of fun. It's got that same sort of like swashbuckling adventure that the Mask of Zorro has, and a lot of movies don't have anymore. And man, I know why Disney turned this into a franchise, because of the money, and they made tons of money. But I really wish this had just been like the only entry in this series and just had been like a cool little one-off movie, because I don't know, man, those sequels, they just get progressively worse, and they ruin everything that made that first movie so much fun. Like the first movie, just leans into all the fantasy, and Johnny Depp, while he, steals the scenes, he's not like the main focus of the story. Everything that works in the first film, they subsequently destroy in the sequels, where they start explaining all the fantasy stuff, and they make Jack Sparrow the main guy because everyone loves Johnny Depp's performance, and it just kind of sours what made that first one so good. But the first one, still good. I think it's on Disney Plus. That's where I watched it.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, that first movie is amazing. I will say this. I do think that this was prime for a franchise. I think the problem here is they went into production on 2 and 3 without having like a full script. And they were like building sets and then like writing scenes around like the sets that they were building. It was kind of was that around the writer's strike? I'm betting it must have been around the writer's strike.
Yeah, I'm not for sure, but yeah, Peter, I agree with you. The second one, I think the second one is not a good movie, but it has really great moments.
Yeah,
like there are sequences in number 2 I think are really stand out. I think 3 is where it starts circling the whirlpool, and 4 and 5 are just disasters. I can't even recommend hate watching 4 and 5 at this point.
Yeah,
I like how the first one is kind of a ghost story too. Like it's the fantasy mythology elements are there, but it's more a ghost story first and forward. And I feel like that element got lost in the later sequels.
Yeah, like the first movie, yeah, like there's ghosts, and that's really the only real supernatural thing. And then all the sequels, they keep upping it, and it's like they're living in this completely fantasy world. Like, the first one, even though there are ghosts in it, it still feels like it's set in the real world. And then by the time you get to part 2 and part 3 and so on, there's just all this insane, goofy sci-fi shit that just does not fit in to what made the first film so cool. But so Pirates 1, everyone rewatch that and then ignore the rest.
It feels like those story decisions were driven by what they could do with visual effects, and like they did such a good job with the ghosts and those sorts of Barbossa effects and stuff with the first one, that they're like, okay, how can we top this, because it has to be bigger and more in the sequels. And then they just sort of got sucked into this CG vortex of of their own creation.
Yeah. As a fan of Disneyland and theme parks, I'm not sure how many of you guys remember or have been on the ride Pirates of the Caribbean that this is based on, but it's kind of ridiculous. Every time I go on this ride, I like look at it and like think about how they reverse engineered that first movie from this ride that like Walt Disney made, decades ago. And it's like, it was never there was not even a story in that ride. That ride is like kind of a mood piece. Like you're going back in time and experiencing the days of pirates. And it's funny how like the whole ghost thing is taken out of the first act of that ride. And I don't know, if you've never experienced Pirates of the Caribbean the ride, look up a POV on YouTube, because it's just funny how many things were kind of like reverse engineered from that ride into a story, and it shouldn't work, and somehow it is great. And I also want to publicly shame all you guys, because nobody here has watched Prop Culture, which has an episode on Pirates of the Caribbean. So it's now on Disney Plus. We talked about it weeks ago.
Is the episode about the movie or the ride?
About the movie.
Oh, see, I'd be more interested in like,
but there is
behind the scenes of the ride, because I
me too.
went on the ride when I was a youngster. The one time I went to Disney, and I loved the ride. This was before the movie even came out. Mm-hmm. I love that part where like you come out of like a bridge or something, and like there's a whole sky that's like opening up, and it like blew me away as a kid. I was like, how is this? Because it's indoors. I was like, how is this indoors? This makes no sense to me.
Did they cover that in the Imagineering story, Peter?
They covered a little in the Imagineering story, but they do go to the ride in the Prop Culture, because there's been rumors that there's some props from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies in the ride, and it's been something that's been debated by fans for many years, and they finally go into the ride and come to a conclusion. So there's your cliffhanger if you want to see that. I would say that episode is probably not the best episode of Prop Culture, but it is on Disney Plus now. I really think it's probably one of the most bingeable, easy to watch, fun. If you are a film fanatic, you will enjoy the series. So anyways, I know I've already talked at length about that, but but Brad and I talked about it before it was available. So now it's available to all. So watch it.
I'm going to put a link in the show notes, Peter, for a thing that you should read and everybody else should read, from a really good theme park blog, Disney theme park blog called Passport to Dreams. And the writer tends to like just dwell on like the actual art and like aesthetics of theme park design. And there's an article about the atmosphere, tone, and hidden story of Parts of the Caribbean at Disneyland. That's one of the best pieces of theme park writing I've ever read, and it's so it puts in perspective just how different the film franchise is from the original intention of the ride in a way that is almost shocking. So I'm going to put in the show notes.
But wait, do we know what the original intention of the ride was? Because like I feel like there's been so many fan theories over the years. Like the ride begins with your boat going through this bayou, and there's this guy on his porch playing a banjo, and there's been so many like fan theories of like, oh, is this whole thing that guy telling you the story of the pirates, or is it he falling asleep and then this is a dream? Like, is this like this link you're saying, is this an interpretation, or is this like based on actual?
It's a combination of both, but it is by far the most scholarly look at theme park design I've ever read. It's very, very good. It's in the show notes. You should definitely check it out.
I will take a look. Ben, what have you been watching?
So I've been on this Powell and Pressburger kick recently, as I've mentioned before on Slash Film Daily, and I sort of roped my wife into watching one of these movies with me because I've enjoyed all of the ones that I've seen so far, and I was like, all right, here's one that I think you'll like. It's this romance movie. I mean, not that she only likes romance movies, but I think we were both in the mood for something light, and I think it would have, it was something that I thought both of us would react well to in that moment. And it's called I Know Where I'm Going! From 1945. And I was like, right before I turned it on, I was like, watch, this will be like the one Powell and Pressburger movie that just sucks. And this movie does not suck, but it is fine. Whereas all the other ones that I've seen have been, varying levels of like masterworks. So it was a little disappointing in that regard, especially since it was like the first one that I like made this big deal to show my wife. And it was like, okay, yeah, this is a fine movie. But the premise is really interesting. It's about this English woman who is, this brassy dame who has an independent spirit and all that stuff. And she is supposed to be marrying this really rich guy, this older industrialist. on this island off the coast of Scotland, and she travels to go. He's already there, and she is traveling to get to her own wedding, and weather, like the storm rolls in, basically bad weather, sort of strands her on this other island, and she just sort of has to wait there until the weather I guess improves enough where she can get out to her, soon to be husband. And of course there is a handsome ship captain guy who is played by Roger Livesey, who is a Powell and Pressburger regular, who's really, really great. And he is on this island with her. And so her, she slowly starts to fall for this guy instead of the guy that she's supposed to be marrying. So it's a pretty basic concept, but I thought the execution of it was not as great as I wanted it to be. I think, because it's Powell and Pressburger, there's of course a base level of artistry that is there that you can see, but it just feels like one of their lesser works to me. I don't know if anybody else here has seen this movie, but I'd never heard of it before watching it. But this is certainly not one of the ones, as far as I can tell, that is like held up in, super high regard by like the critical community when talking about their work. But yeah, so that's on Criterion Channel if you want to check it out right now. Although like I said, I would sort of recommend a lot of their other works above this one. I also watched The Last Picture Show, which is from 1971. It is co-written and directed by Peter Bogdanovich, and it stars Timothy Bottoms as who I don't think I've seen his work before, but he plays a character named Sonny Crawford, who in early 1950s Texas, it's like a coming of age story, and he is just this guy who like sort of hangs out in this like desolate small North Texas town, and he hangs out with his buddy Dwayne, who's played by Jeff Bridges, a very young Jeff Bridges, and it's sort of bizarre to look at that and think about how like his voice is pretty much exactly the same now as it was all those years ago, and just watch him and how he's changed or not changed as a performer. This movie was nominated for 8 Oscars, including Best Picture, and it actually won 2 Oscars for Ben Johnson for Best Supporting Actor and Cloris Leachman for Best Supporting Actress. They're both tremendous in the movie, but it's a really sort of slow, like I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of like it's very frank about sexuality. It's basically like sort of like an aimless movie is how I would describe it, I guess. It's a coming of age film, which Peter, I know you're a big fan of like that subgenre. But it sort of is just like about time and like what, escaping the small town and like whether these kids are going to be trapped there or whether they're going to be able to move on with their life and sort of come up and out on the other side of this thing. And it's like this really dusty, windy little movie, and I know it's a big deal. I'd just never seen it before, but anybody else here seen The Last Picture Show? Have any thoughts about it?
I bought the Criterion Blu-ray like years ago when it was on sale, and I have yet to watch it. It's on my shelf unopened. One of these days I'll get around to watching it.
Yeah, Randy Quaid shows up in a very small supporting role, so that was kind of a fun surprise. And Timothy Bottoms reminded me a little bit of Paul Rudd, so I'll be interested, Chris, if you watch it, and if you get that same Paul Rudd vibe from the lead character there. So that is also, I believe, on the Criterion Channel, although I watched it on Turner Classic Movies, so I'll have to double check that. One thing I know for sure is on the Criterion Channel is High and Low, which is one of the best movies I've seen in a long, long time. This is a crime drama directed by Akira Kurosawa. I wrote about it for the quarantine stream column that we're doing on Slash Film, so I'm not going to talk about this for very long, but holy hell, this is a really, really great movie. It is this kidnapping thriller where Toshiro Mifune, who is one of Kurosawa's longtime collaborators, who's in Yojimbo and Senjuro and all these terrific samurai movies. This is an urban set movie where he plays this guy. The setup for this movie is so brilliant. He plays this corporate executive, like a shoemaker at this factory, like who oversees shoes, and what happens is he thinks that his son is kidnapped, but it's actually his son's best friend, who is the son of his chauffeur. And he's right in the middle of trying to orchestrate this corporate takeover where he takes over the company and will be able to make the shoes the way that he wants to make them. And the movie does a really good job of putting you on his side early on. It's not like, oh, he's an executive. Why do I give a shit about this guy? You're definitely like in his corner. And then this kidnapping happens. And so the kidnapper is demanding such a high sum of money for ransom that he will not be able to orchestrate this corporate takeover that he's been working his entire life to achieve. So it puts him in this really, really interesting moral quandary. And that's the whole first half of the movie. The whole thing pretty much takes place, the whole first half anyway, in like one room, in their living room, this family's living room, as he talks to the kidnapper, and Kurosawa just moves the camera like a motherfucking boss. Like, this guy is like, it's unreal watching the blocking. I think it would be like Steven Spielberg is like the modern master of blocking. There are so many video essays about that. But Kurosawa, man, I have to believe that Spielberg grew up being, heavily influenced by that stuff. I've not looked into that to see if he was, but there are some shot selections in this that seem like Spielberg ripped them straight out of High and Low. So the second half of this movie is like a police procedural that feels way ahead of its time. This came out in like the early 60s, 1963, I think. And it's just this really methodical look of how to catch the kidnapper. And it reminded me a little bit of like Bong Joon-ho's Memories of Murder a little bit. So man, this movie rules so hard. It's called High and Low. It's on the Criterion channel right now. Definitely check it out if you have not seen it. Has anybody else here seen this one?
Yeah, this movie rules. Yeah. It is one. When we talk about the best Kurosawa movies, you have like 20 movies to consider for like any list, and this is top 5. So
yeah,
like Chris with Last Picture Show, this is one that I have the Criterion Blu-ray for, but I haven't gotten around to watching it. But now I actually left that in my apartment in New York, so I can't watch it on my Blu-ray, but I'll check it out on Criterion channel.
Yeah, it's really great. You'll love it, HD. Okay, so I also watched, this was on Turner Classic Movies as well. It's a movie called Koyaanisqatsi, which is a Hopi word that I believe means life out of balance. And this is a documentary. It's a silent documentary, so there's no dialogue, and it's like this experimental film from the early 80s. And the whole thing is basically just like time-lapse footage of a bunch of different things, like nature and technology. That's sort of like the clash that this movie is documenting. And it's really a fascinating watch. It opens with these shots of like Monument Valley and these similar areas where there's like no human life visible at all, and the landscape looks almost totally alien. And then later on in the film, it really gets into like city life, and it's just lots of time lapses and lots of really gorgeously framed shots, and just the juxtaposition of the nature and the technology, with this really haunting score by Philip Glass in the background is it just provides some really interesting results and sort of makes you think about the way that we're treating the planet and all kinds of things like that. It's like that. It's more of an experience than a movie, I think. There are these super fast helicopter shots over a lot of different types of landscapes that reminded me of Soarin', the Disney theme park ride. And there's this really, really amazingly framed shot with a Joshua tree in the foreground and then an atomic bomb explosion happening miles away in the background, where the mushroom cloud takes on this similar shape to the Joshua tree, and the juxtaposition between nature and man-made horrors is just like never more clear in the movie than it is in that shot. Philip Glass's score, like I mentioned, it's this like electronic score. It's reminding me of like a precursor to Drive, and that score, of course, was like monumentally influential on a ton of things from there. So it sort of feels like the text of the electronic like synthwave movement almost. Yeah, it's the score, I think, is like one of the most notable things about it. But if you're a fan of like time-lapse photography and just experiences where you can just sort of like sit back and you don't have to like pay attention to a story, but it's like I think the Wikipedia page calls it a tone poem. That makes a lot of sense to me there. So yeah, it's called Koyaanisqatsi. You may have trouble spelling it, but you can find it in the show notes of this episode. And then I finally I finished my rewatch of Breaking Bad, which cements my opinion that it's like in the top 3 shows I've ever seen in my life. It's so freaking good. I watched this feature-length documentary that came with the Blu-ray box set called No Half Measures: Creating the Final Season of Breaking Bad, and I was a little disappointed with it. It's nice to see, they take you really methodically through every part of the whole production and every episode in that final season. And it shows you, the basically like fly on the wall kind of stuff as it's going, and then it's interspersed with talking head interviews from everybody involved. But I really wanted to see more fly on the wall stuff from the writers' room, because famously for the final season of Breaking Bad, they did these flash forwards where they wrote themselves into a corner where Walter White has this giant machine gun, and he's all frazzled looking and bearded, and that's how the season sort of opens, and you don't know what the hell is going on, and the writers didn't know what the hell was going on either, and they just had to figure it out by the time they got to the end of the show. And I really was hoping for a more in-depth look at their struggles and efforts to essentially put enough train track down when the train is already running, but it really is more of a breezy sort of feature-length featurette almost, instead of an in-depth documentary. But it's still an enjoyable watch for anybody who's watched the entirety of Breaking Bad. So Breaking Bad is streaming on Netflix right now, but I think this documentary was only available in the Blu-ray box set.
Yeah, despite you saying that it's not great, I was looking to see if it was available streaming anywhere, and it looks like it is not. You are correct. It's only on that box set. So I guess I won't watch it. HJ,
or you could buy the box set, Peter.
I don't need more physical possessions owning me, HT. Didn't that box set come in a gigantic barrel or something?
Yeah, it does. It has a lot of cool bonus things. It actually has a Los Pollos Hermanos apron that I use pretty regularly in my kitchen.
HT, what have you been watching?
I watched Den of Thieves, which just hit Netflix recently.
I'm very, very excited about this, HT. I'm very excited you watched Den of Thieves.
Wait.
I will say...
Before HT says what she's going to say, why are you excited, Chris?
Because I love Den of Thieves. Den of Thieves is dirtbag Heat, basically. It's a remake of Heat made by dirtbags, and Gerard Butler is just constantly drunk in the movie and chugging Pepto-Bismol. And it's just a mess, and I love it. It's just a beautiful mess.
Okay.
Now don't say anything negative, HT.
Well, I have to say that I kind of reluctantly came into watching Den of Thieves because I have a friend who, for some reason, loves this movie as much as you. And I had a trade-off in that, I was trying to force him to watch Fleabag, and thus he said he will watch Fleabag if I watch Den of Thieves. So I watched Den of Thieves.
I don't believe this. I figured after you were out of your New York apartment, you would stop blaming what you're watching on your roommate. But it's still happening, HT. What is going on here? I
live up to my promises. I can't say I like Den of Thieves. I can't say that. I mean, I do appreciate Gerard Butler's second phase of his career as the B-movie king. And I liked his performance in this. I also liked Ice Cube's son, O'Shea Jackson Jr. I thought he was really good in this, and I thought I was kind of confused because his character was the supporting role, and he's so charismatic and fun to watch, and I was wondering why he was just kind of the smaller supporting role. But there's a fun twist in this movie that explains why he's in this role at the beginning, and I enjoyed the twists. I enjoyed the dirtbag heists of it, I guess. It's fine. I'm sorry, Chris.
Have you seen Heat, HT?
No, I actually haven't watched Heat.
I feel like if you had watched Heat first and then watched this, you would appreciate this even more, because it really is. It's not even trying to pretend it's anything else but a cheap remake of Heat with a little of the usual suspects thrown in for some reason that makes no sense. And I feel like maybe that way, not that your opinion is invalidated because you haven't seen Heat. I'm just saying maybe you would have cherished the gem that is Den of Thieves a bit more.
Chris, wait until you hear her top 5 Pixar movies and see if you agree with that.
Is Heat number one? Is
Heat is number one.
I'm sorry,
It'd be
what were
really
you saying?
funny, Chris, if I watched Heat and I was like, that was just a ripoff of Den of Thieves.
Yes.
How dare they?
I do
Michael
wonder,
Mann.
if you saw Heat now, would you be less entertained by Heat because you saw the ripoff? Like,
No.
like I feel
Heat's been ripped off by Heat's entered the fabric
Yeah.
of American filmmaking in such a deep DNA level that I'm very curious to see how HC reacts to Heat right now.
And like even plot wise, you can put the entire plot of Heat aside, and the performances in that movie are so, I mean, not always great, but always interesting. That anybody watching Heat fresh for the first time will have a lot to pay attention to.
Watch after like a couple weeks, I'll be like, wow, Heat just ripped off Den of Thieves. How dare they?
But Heat doesn't have a scene where Al Pacino picks a donut off of a crime scene and eats it, as Gerard Butler does in Den of Thieves. So, which is the better movie? I don't know.
Yep, that's the question. All right, well, I watched Den of Thieves. You know what? At some point, I'm going to watch Heat. I kind of am curious now to compare the two. I did it backwards, but I'm gonna watch Heat finally, which is not streaming anywhere. It's only for rent. But
Bummer.
This is the movie that got me around to finally watching Heat. Thank you, Den of Thieves. Another movie that I watched that I really enjoyed is My Man Godfrey. So every now and then I feel kind of the urge to watch a screwball comedy, and I decided to check out My Man Godfrey, which I'd never seen before. It's directed by Gregory LaCava, and it stars William Powell and Carol Lombard. I actually didn't know anything about this movie other than the fact that it stars Carol Lombard and William Powell, Mr. Thin Man himself, and that it's a screwball comedy. But I was really pleasantly surprised by this movie. It's a 1936 film, and it is a social satire that actually grapples with the effects of the Depression in a way that I rarely saw in a lot of classic Hollywood films. I guess you see it a lot more in 1930s films, and it's really funny. It's really interesting to see like how Hollywood sometimes touches on it and sometimes it doesn't. But it follows a debut, like an heiress type of a woman played by Carol Lombard, who is on a scavenger hunt with the other rich people of New York City, and her goal is to find a forgotten man, which was a common word used in sort of Depression era America to refer to people who were at the bottom rung and like greatly affected by the Depression. I had heard this term before. I think I'd seen Gold Diggers of 1933 or something, and there's a whole song called like Remember My Forgotten Man, and I kind of assumed that it mostly dealt with veterans coming back from World War I who were struggling to reintegrate into society and were kind of economically and financially just like on the lower rung of society, with the addition of the Great Depression really just exacerbating that. But I think that it kind of becomes an umbrella term for anyone who is just kind of really financially on the rocks, like at rock bottom. And she finds the forgotten man, played by William Powell, who is a homeless man living on a city dump in Hooversville on the East River. And he is at first incredibly insulted by this whole scavenger hunt, and refuses to return. But she charms him, and he decides to come and to the center of the scavenger hunt, insults everyone there. And she decides to hire him as the family's butler, because they are a very eccentric family that goes through a whole string of butlers day after day. And he does, and he sticks it out. And it's actually, yeah, like I said, it's like a social satire that kind of makes fun and pokes fun at like these an uber wealthy while being a sort of screwball rom-com. Mostly it's Carol Lombard just like fawning over William Powell and how hot he is. And I have to say, I wonder if it's also quarantine effect, but I was like, wow, William Powell's like really good looking in this movie. And especially when he's living homeless and he has all like this beard and everything. When he shaves it off, I was a little bit sad. I was like, oh man, he like looks really good. But I really I feel like this might actually be like one of my favorite screwball comedies I've seen. A lot of screwball comedies, they set up a really fun premise, and it's really strong based off of the chemistry of the leads. And Carole Lombard and William Powell do have great chemistry. They were actually married for a couple years before My Man Godfrey was shot. And I adored their chemistry, but like in a lot of screwball comedies, the second half kind of falls apart, and it kind of gets wrapped up really neatly. And there's actually some fun twists in My Man Godfrey that keeps the narrative going strong, and kind of has some more of that depth to it that you don't always get in a screwball film. It's mostly just shenanigans and hijinks, and while there's a fair few amount of them there in this movie, I really enjoyed how it just kind of kept a pretty strong narrative going, and kept me like kind of on my toes. And I really enjoyed My Man Godfrey. I watched it on Amazon Prime. I will say that the ending does kind of wrap things up a little neatly, as per a lot of movies shot in the 1930s. But I really enjoyed this film. William Powell and Carole Lombard are just so fun and so delightful to watch. Carole Lombard is a little bit on the really eccentric side, but she's just so funny, and she's so entertaining in this film. And yeah, William Powell, man, I did not expect to come out liking him this much in this movie. And I've only seen a little bit of the first Thin Man movie, but now I kind of want to go and check out more of them. Like, he's really great at that banter, as you see like in the Thin Man movies. It's all about him. And oh gosh, who is it in Thin Man? Is it Myrna Loy? I can't remember.
Yeah,
yes, right. Myrna Loy. And he has like great chemistry and dynamic with them, and they have that good married couple banter and dynamic. And he is just he really holds his own, and he's so fun to watch. I really liked My Man Godfrey, and that's streaming now on Amazon Prime. And the last thing I'm watching is I talked last week about rewatching Community, and Ben and I discussed whether I would go on past the first 3 seasons, which were showrun by Dan Harmon, and watch the 4th season, which has switched out Dan Harmon, or fired Dan Harmon actually, and replaced him with David Guarascio and Moses Port as the showrunners for that season. And I reached that dreaded 4th season, and it's not good. I will say, like, I've been getting through it fine. Like, it's not unwatchable per se, but it just is so obviously a shadow and a pale imitation of what Dan Harmon was doing with the first 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. Like, the new showrunners just kind of saw that those first 3 seasons, and they tried their best to imitate it, or maybe not even tried their best. It's really lazy in a lot of ways. It's very, very clear that the jokes aren't as sharp or as rapid fire as they used to be. And you can see even, like, especially Chevy Chase is like checked out. Like, he barely appears in this season, and it's kind of funny to see. But there are some fun moments, and it's mostly because the cast are still really invested, and they're still just like really fun to watch. But the writing is really just drops off, and it's mostly forgettable stuff. As I was watching it, I was like, wow, I don't remember any of what happened in these episodes. And after I watch it, I forget it again. But I think I will continue on with my rewatch of Community, because I do remember really liking season 5. Even when it loses a lot of the cast. And I'm almost like done with season 4. And yeah, it's just really aggressively mediocre to bad. Like, it's not unwatchable, but it just it's clear like that Dan Harmon and his voice is not there anymore.
He was brought back for season 5, right? That's when he came back?
Yes, he was brought back for season 5 and season 6. So there is a return to form for season 5 and 6, not as good as with seasons 1 through 3. But I do remember, actually, like, there are a lot of episodes from season 5 that I'm like, wow, I thought that was earlier, but they are in season 5. And, like, there are some good moments in season 5. So I'm looking forward to getting to that and getting past this hump of season 4.
Well, tune in next week as we hear HT realize how much of Michael Mann's heat was stolen by Christopher Nolan. Okay, let's move on to what we've been eating. I this week, Knott's Berry Farm is this theme park near Disneyland. It is a classic theme park. It actually started as a berry farm. And at the berry farm, they sold berries on the side of the road. Mrs. Knott opened up a chicken. She opened up their den to sell her famous fried chicken dinners. That became so popular that there was a line down the street, hours long, that Mr. Knott's built this ghost town to entertain people. So it was like an old Western ghost town to entertain people. And that's what became Knott's Berry Farm, the famous theme park that is in Buena Park, California. And Knott's Berry Farm, like Disneyland, Disney World, Universal Studios, is closed down because of the pandemic. But this week they opened up the chicken dinner restaurant. Not for guests, because, you still can't eat indoors anywhere in California, as far as I know. But they are taking to-go orders. So you can go there and place a to-go order, or you can actually go on their website and pre-order a meal online, and then you just drive up. Someone opens your back door, puts it in your car, and you get to drive away. That's what I did. And we recorded a video about it for Ordinary Adventures. Mrs. Knott's fried chicken is considered to be really great. Kitra had never tried it before. I've had it before. But we also got a whole big meal, which included a boysenberry pie. Knott's Berry Farm is famous for their boysenberries. And that was great. And there's their biscuits are just amazing. And you dip them in this boysenberry jam. It's just so good. But if you want to see us eating some food and see what a theme park is now turned into, they're now serving meals on the side of the road. It's interesting to see us picking up how the whole process goes, because we recorded it on the vlog. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Jacob, what have you been eating?
I am not seeking out delicious, famous fried chicken, because during a pandemic, you revert to who you are when you were 21, which means I'm reverting to being a total trash person. After literally not touching them for years, I've been eating Doritos and drinking Mike's Hard Lemonade like a filthy, foul, fucking piece of trash. Wow. Doritos are the worst chips in the world. I'm eating them. The Cool Ranch.
Whoa. Wait,
you're picking Cool Ranch?
Doritos. I don't eat them, but I don't think of them as that bad. What kind are you eating?
I mean the Cool Ranch, the only kind that matters.
Oh, never mind. Then yes, those are garbage.
I was walking by, I was doing my supply runs. I saw a bag of Doritos and said in the corner of the bag, "Now with more flavor." And I said, you know what? I'm sitting inside all day because of the pandemic. I got to try the more flavor Cool Ranch Doritos.
What does that mean? More seasoning on top of it?
Oh yeah, I choked on a few chips, not because they're super sharp and too crunchy and tear up your throat when they go down, but because there's too much powder on them now. But you know what? They're still Doritos. They're still a reminder of who I was, over a decade ago. And Wonder Woman's on the bag to celebrate the movie that's not coming out anymore. So. I can remind myself things are normal. I'm 21, damn it. I'm not in my 30s. I'm 21, and the Wonder Woman's coming out, and these Doritos are perfectly fine and normal. And also, I've been drinking so much hard liquor that I said, damn it, I need something softer. I want to be able to get lightly buzzed instead of becoming an alcoholic every single night. So rather than go spend $70 on 2 large bottles of vodka, I bought some Mike's Hard Lemonade because I don't like beer. I said.
I haven't had Mike's Hard Lemonade since college, since before I was 21, because that's what you think alcohol is.
Yeah, exactly. Because look, HT, my wife and I are going through more vodka and tequila per week than is sustainable. So she can enjoy beer. I think beer is gross because I'm still a whiny little baby who never developed that taste. So as a whiny little baby, I had to go to Mike's Hard Lemonade.
Hey, so I agree with you, Jacob. Beer is gross. I am also a wuss squad. Unite. What I drink, what I would recommend to you, Jacob. I'm not sure if you've tried this, but my local grocery store has this cider from a company called Ace Hard Cider, and it's pineapple cider. It is amazing.
I'm picky about cider. There's actually a cider brand called Scrumpy. That is absolutely delicious. It is one of the best things I've ever had in my life, but it's very seasonal. It only tends to come in down in Texas, during certain months of the year. And last time I was in my liquor store for a supply run, they were out of Scrumpy. So I'm reverting to the next best thing, which is Mike's Hard Lemonade.
Okay, I since Jacob brought up the Doritos thing, I want to go around the table and ask you guys what your favorite chips are. I will start things off. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you two options here. I love the Tostitos with the hint of lime, and I love dipping that in like some kind of like pineapple peach salsa. I think that's great. And I love Kettle brand jalapeno chips. So HT, what is your favorite chips?
I'm pretty boring because I don't try out a lot of chips, but I do like Fritos. I like a good Fritos chip. Oh, I will go a little bit exotic on you guys and talk about shrimp chips, which are very common, commonly eaten amongst like Asians, and I love those. Like that's one chip that I would always eat at the beach for some reason. Like my family would just bring all these bags of shrimp chips at the beach, so I associate shrimp chips with sand, but they're still delicious.
See, we tried those on our Japanese. Yeah, we went and got some
sand and chips.
we went and got some Japanese candy and snacks, and we did a video eating those things. I do not like shrimp, so I just sniffed them, and I just was almost gonna barf just from like the smell. But Kitra tried them, and she likes shrimp, and she like almost threw up. So
they're good. I don't know what to tell you.
You don't have the Asian palate, Peter. Come on.
Yeah, Ben, favorite chips.
I like salt and pepper chips. So I think it's Lay's has like a kettle cooked sea salt and crushed black pepper chip. There's also one, I don't remember the name. I feel like Brad would be disappointed in me because I don't know the name brands of these chips. But there's also like a waffle type of chip that is just like salt and pepper. Yeah, simple that way.
Okay, then Chris, what is your favorite chips?
I don't really eat chips because I'm like constantly trying to lose weight. But when I did eat chips, I liked the nacho Doritos. Not the Cool Ranch ones are terrible, but I liked the nacho cheese ones. And I also like salt and vinegar chips, which are like a very acquired taste, but I think they're pretty good actually. But I don't think I've had chips in a very long time.
I feel like I can eat some salt and vinegar, and then some of them are too vinegary for me. Like, it depends on the brand. But,
yeah.
Okay. I think that does it for today's
Hey,
Slash
Peter, you're implying that Cool Ranch are actually my favorite chips and not a coping mechanism.
Oh, I thought they were.
Not at all. They're trash. They're trash for trash people.
But I thought you said you were a trash person.
Oh, I am. But during normal times, when things are back to normal, I'm going back to eating cheddar Sun chips, which are my go-to chip of choice.
I don't think I've ever had the cheddar version of Sun chips. I've just had like the normal version, which is what, like a corn kind of.
Yeah, it's sort of like whatever a basic corn chip is. But yeah, I think the cheddar Sun chips are exceptional.
How do those compare to Doritos?
They're like, all right, look, a Dorito lives in a hole by the highway, and it preys upon motorists and like takes their hair for wigs and like plays dress up with a mirror and its stole. A cheddar Sun chip has a 2-car garage and a family. It has a job. It's very nice. It brings a pot roast to your potluck.
I'm so glad you asked that final question, Peter, because now I will always think of that whenever I think of Doritos and Sun chips.
Okay, you can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you on Monday. That was a good episode,
Peter,
guys.
Peter,
I think that was
Peter,
good. People will enjoy the chip thing.
Peter.
Yeah?
Peter. I've opened up the gargantuan book of insult, offense, and effrontery.
Is there a section on chips?
Riposte, costs, quips, imply, put down by Louis A. Safian. No section on chips as far as I know, but there is a section called dumbbells on page 55. Dumbbells. Peter, the only fast way you'll ever broaden your mind is to put it under a train.
Wow.
So you're saying I should squash my head?
Peter, the only fast way you'll ever broaden your mind is to put it under a train.
By the way, when I was a kid, I lived next to a railroad track, and I would go and put like pennies on there, and like the train would come by like a few times a day, and it would like squash the pennies, so it'd be like these
Peter,
like
that's dangerous. That
I
could
know.
derail the train.
Yeah,
Trying to kill everyone.
Yeah, and then
Are
my
you
dad
Mr.
would like
Glass
yell at
from
me.
Unbreakable?
Yeah, he found out about it, and he like yelled at me. And my house was like right next to the train, so theoretically I could have put it there, and it could have derailed, and then like ran into our house.
Oh
So
my god.
yeah,
Peter, the only fast way you ever broaden your mind is to put it under a train. Ben, he's nobody's fool. Poor guy. He couldn't get anyone to adopt him.
Sad.
It's very
Chris.
depressing.
Chris, he speaks straight from the shoulder. Too bad his remarks don't start higher up.
wait, what? I'm a
No,
little...
Peter, no.
Don't
We're
say
not-
Don't
anything.
engage.
Just
Speaks
repeat
straight
it.
from the shoulder. I'm sorry, Chris speaks straight from the shoulder. Too bad his remarks don't start higher up.
Oh, okay, because it's I see, I got it.
HT, she has a heart of gold and a brain of pure meringue.
Aw.
Sounds delicious.
Oh, Brad isn't here, but the programs he watches on TV are Vidiots Delight.
That's pretty good.